The birthday no one expected. The night had a quiet beauty to it. Sandra Bullock's birthday had always been something simple, something private, something away from the noise of Hollywood. She never liked the idea of giant crowds or flashing lights on a day that meant so much to her heart. For her, birthdays were about closeness, about the few people who mattered, about small candles glowing in the soft silence of a living room instead of a loud ballroom filled with strangers. But this year carried something different, a strange energy in the air that she could not quite explain. It was as if something unusual waited behind the closed doors, something that would change the meaning of that night forever. The evening began with soft laughter, close friends, a handful of familiar faces, and of course the one person she could always trust to keep things calm and honest. Keanu Reeves. He had slipped into the house quietly, with the same humble smile that always carried more warmth than words. He brought a small gift wrapped in simple paper, not a show of wealth, but a token filled with thought. Sandra hugged him tightly, feeling the comfort that only long years of respect and friendship could bring. There was no need for speeches or fancy words between them. Their connection had always been built on something real, something rare in a world that often chased only appearances. But as the clock ticked forward, whispers started spreading across the room. Someone outside, someone unexpected, had arrived. The quiet conversation suddenly turned into low gasps. Sandra noticed the shift in the air. It was no ordinary guest. It was a name people never thought would be connected to her small, private gathering. Joe Rogan had walked through the doorway. The silence that followed was sharp, almost heavy. Joe Rogan was known for his boldness, his voice, his presence that filled every room he entered. This was not his world, not his circle. People exchanged glances, confusion shining in their eyes. Why was he here? How did he even know? Sandra herself froze for a moment, her heart beating faster, not with fear, but with a kind of wonder that carried both curiosity and worry. She had not seen this coming. She had not expected him. And yet, there he was, standing tall, looking strangely humble as his eyes searched the room until they found her. Keanu, always calm, always steady, noticed Sandra's unease. He placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. That small gesture carried weight, a silent reassurance that whatever this night was about to become, she would not face it alone. Sandra took a deep breath and stepped forward, her voice steady, though her thoughts trembled inside her. "Joe," she said softly, almost in disbelief. "You came?" The room held its breath. Joe Rogan's presence was not just surprising. It was unsettling for many. He carried a reputation of strength, sharp words, and unfiltered honesty. His arrival created tension, the kind that made every eye follow his next move. Yet, what he did next was not what anyone expected. He smiled, not the bold smile of a man trying to dominate the moment, but a quiet smile, almost uncertain, almost gentle. He walked toward Sandra and held out a small box. "I didn't come here to surprise you," he said in a low, thoughtful tone. "I came here because sometimes life reminds us to show respect while we still can." Those words cut through the silence like light piercing through clouds. The guests shifted in their seats. This was not the Joe Rogan they imagined, not the voice of podcasts or comedy shows, but a man carrying something deeper, something unspoken. Sandra, touched and unsettled at the same time, accepted the gift with trembling hands. She did not know what to say. Kindness had a way of breaking defenses, and in that moment she saw a side of Joe that no one expected. The evening did not return to normal. It shifted into something else entirely. Conversations grew softer. Eyes kept returning to Joe, to Sandra, to Keanu, trying to make sense of the connection building between three people who came from such different paths. Sandra's birthday was no longer just a private celebration. It had become a stage for something greater, a story of humility, respect, and unexpected humanity. The suspense grew heavier as the hours passed. There was kindness in Joe's tone, but there was also a shadow, a weight behind his words that hinted at a story not yet told. Sandra could feel it. Keanu could see it. Everyone in the room knew the night was far from over. And as the cake was brought out and the candles flickered in the quiet glow, one truth became clear. This birthday was about to unravel secrets that would touch not only Sandra's heart, but everyone watching closely. And that was only the beginning. Shadows beneath. The light. The candles flickered gently as Sandra leaned forward to blow them out. Her eyes closed for a brief second, whispering a silent wish that no one else could hear. The guests clapped softly, but their attention kept breaking away from the cake and turning back toward Joe Rogan. It was almost as if the entire room was waiting for something else to happen, something bigger, something that none of them could quite name. Sandra felt it too. The pull of unspoken tension in the air. Keanu Reeves stood quietly beside her, his steady presence like a wall of calmness. His face carried no judgment, only patience, but inside he was watching closely. He had seen this energy before in other rooms, in other lives, moments when someone walked in carrying not just themselves, but the weight of something deeper. Joe Rogan was not here for noise, not here to play the part people expected him to play. He was here with purpose. Keanu sensed it, and that alone made him stay alert. When Sandra finally turned to Joe again, her voice cracked slightly, though she tried to hide it with a smile. "I never thought you would walk into a night like this," she said. "Why today?" Joe took a breath, his eyes scanning the room, almost searching for the right words. The guests leaned closer without meaning to, their curiosity pulling them in. "Because," Joe said slowly, "sometimes silence lasts too long. Sometimes you wait, and before you know it, the moment you wanted to speak has already passed. I didn't want that to happen again." His words carried weight, but also mystery. Sandra's heart sank a little as if there was a piece of the story she was missing. What silence was he talking about? What words had been left unsaid? She wanted to ask, but before she could, one of the guests interrupted with forced laughter, trying to ease the tension. Yet no one laughed with him. The air was too heavy, too charged with unspoken truths. Keanu stepped forward, his voice calm, but firm. "Whatever reason brought you here tonight, Joe, I think you should tell her. Holding back only deepens the distance." Everyone froze. Sandra's breath caught in her throat. Joe's face hardened for a second, then softened again. He looked at Keanu with respect, as if he understood the wisdom behind the words. Then, slowly, he nodded. "There was a time," Joe began, "years ago, when I should have shown up. I should have been there for someone close to me, but I stayed away because I thought it wasn't my place. I thought my voice didn't belong, but that choice haunted me. I lost a chance to say something that mattered. I came tonight because I didn't want that kind of regret with you, Sandra." The room fell into silence again. Sandra's chest tightened. The sincerity in Joe's voice was undeniable. But why her? What connection did he mean? Her mind raced. With questions. Before she could respond, another twist came. A voice from near the back spoke up, one that none of them expected. "So it's true then. You've carried this all along." Everyone turned to see who had spoken. It was one of Sandra's oldest friends, someone who had known her since her early days in Hollywood. Her eyes were fixed on Joe, sharp and questioning. "You never told her, did you?" Joe's jaw tightened. "No," he admitted. "I never told her, and maybe that was my mistake." The guests exchanged confused glances. Sandra's heartbeat grew louder in her ears. What secret was he talking about? What truth had been hidden for so long? She looked at Joe, her voice trembling but steady enough to cut through the silence. "Tell me what you mean, Joe." No more circles. No more shadows. I deserve to know. Joe looked down at the small box in her hands, the gift he had brought. For the first time that evening, his voice cracked as he spoke. What's inside that box will explain everything. The suspense gripped the room tighter than ever. Sandra's fingers shook as she prepared to open it. The guests leaned forward, hearts racing while Keanu's eyes stayed locked on Joe, ready for whatever truth was about to be revealed. What lay inside the box was not just a gift. It was a story, a memory, a confession that would change the entire course of that night, and perhaps even the bond between them all. And as Sandra's hand lifted the lid, the whole room held its breath, knowing that nothing would be the same once the truth came out. The box of unspoken truths. The room was so still that even the flicker of candlelight felt louder than the voices that had gone silent. Sandra's hands trembled as she lifted the lid of the small box Joe Rogan had placed in her palms. Every face in the room leaned closer, eyes wide, breaths caught in their throats. There was something about the way Joe had spoken, the weight in his voice, that made everyone believe this was no ordinary gift. Inside the box lay a folded letter, aged at the edges, the paper slightly yellowed as though it had been kept hidden for many years. Next to it was a photograph, an old black-and-white picture of Sandra, smiling, standing on a movie set in her early career. Her eyes widened as she saw it, her chest tightening with both recognition and confusion. Joe's voice broke the silence. That picture was taken during a time when you were struggling, Sandra. You didn't know it, but I was there that day. I watched from a distance. I saw the way people treated you. I saw the way they doubted you. And I never stepped in. I never said the words I should have said. Sandra's fingers lingered on the photograph. Memories from those early years came flooding back. Long nights of doubt, whispers of criticism, and the heavy feeling of being judged. She remembered the faces of people who laughed behind her back, people who thought she wouldn't make it. But what did Joe have to do with it? Her eyes turned to the letter, hesitating. Keanu, who had been watching quietly with that steady gaze of his, stepped closer. His voice was calm but firm, guiding. Open it, Sandra. Sometimes the hardest truths carry the answers we've been waiting for. Her heart raced. She unfolded the letter slowly, the paper fragile under her touch. Her eyes scanned the first few lines, and almost immediately her breath caught. Dr. Sandra. There are words I never said. I saw you then. Not just the actress on the screen, but the human being behind the scenes. I wanted to tell you that your strength mattered, that your kindness was not wasted, that the respect you showed to others, even when they did not deserve, it would one day lift you higher than their doubts ever could. But I stayed silent, and I regret it. Her eyes blurred with tears as she continued reading. Tonight I came because silence has stolen too much already. I didn't want it to steal this, too. I want you to know. You were seen, you were respected, even when you didn't hear it. And though I was only a shadow in that moment, I want to stand in the light now and say it clearly. I respect you. I admire you. And I should have told you long ago. The letter ended without a signature, but everyone knew it was Joe's handwriting. Sandra lowered the paper slowly, her hands shaking. The room was silent again, but this time, the silence carried a different weight. It was not confusion or suspicion. It was reflection. People could feel the sincerity, the rawness of a man admitting a regret that had lived in his heart for years. Sandra's lips trembled. Why did you keep this hidden for so long? Joe's eyes lowered, and for the first time the bold, confident man seemed vulnerable, almost fragile. Because, he said, I didn't want to seem weak. I built a life around strength, around never showing cracks. But the truth is, the cracks were always there. Hiding them didn't make me stronger. It made me more distant. I thought the moment had passed, but when I heard tonight was your birthday, I couldn't stay away. I had to make it right. Keanu's gaze softened, his calm voice breaking through again. It takes more strength to speak a truth like this than to hide it behind walls. Respect is not weakness, Joe. Kindness is not weakness. You did the right thing by coming. The guests sat stunned, their own emotions stirred. The moment felt larger than just Sandra and Joe. It was about all the times people had stayed silent when they should have spoken, all the words of kindness left unsaid, all the regrets that weighed down hearts years later. But just as Sandra wiped away her tears and began to thank Joe, another unexpected turn hit the room. The friend who had spoken earlier, Sandra's oldest companion, stood again, her voice sharp, almost cutting through the tenderness. "But if you respected her all along, Joe," she said coldly, "why did you also join the voices that doubted her back then?" The air cracked with shock. Heads turned, gasps echoed softly. Sandra froze, her tears dried instantly, replaced by confusion and pain. Joe's face turned pale. Keanu's eyes narrowed, his body stiffening as he realized this night was far from over. Sandra looked at Joe, her voice breaking. "Is that true?" The question hung heavy, heavier than anything that had come before. And in that moment, the birthday night turned from a quiet gathering into a storm of truths waiting to break open. The fracture of truth. The air in the room turned heavy, almost unbreathable. Sandra stood frozen, her eyes fixed on Joe, searching for an answer she wasn't sure she wanted to hear. Moments earlier, she had been touched by the honesty of his letter, by the vulnerability he had finally shown. But now, with her oldest friend's words cutting through the quiet celebration, doubt flooded her chest. Keanu noticed the shift. He could almost feel the walls of Sandra's trust trembling, threatening to collapse. He stayed close, his calm eyes steady on Joe, but even he knew the truth would have to surface now, whether painful or redemptive. Joe looked down, his hands tightening into fists and then loosening again as though he was fighting with himself. "Yes," he admitted softly, his voice breaking. "It's true. I was weak. I said things I should never have said. I let myself be part of the whispers, part of the doubts. I thought it was harmless, just words tossed around in the air. But I know now it wasn't harmless. It was cruel." Gasps echoed. Sandra's eyes filled with both pain and disbelief. "You knew what those words did to me, Joe. You knew how they cut me, how they made me question if I belonged. Why would you add to that? Why would you be part of it?" The silence that followed stretched long. Joe's shoulders slumped, and his voice came out raw, stripped of defense. "Because I was afraid of being different. Everyone else was doubting you, laughing at you. And instead of standing apart, I followed. I wanted to fit in. I wanted to belong. But the truth is, I betrayed myself more than I betrayed you. And I've carried that shame ever since." Keanu stepped forward. His calm voice, steady yet sharp, sliced into the thick air. "People often mistake cruelty for strength and kindness for weakness, but real strength is standing against the crowd, not hiding inside it. You failed back then, Joe. But what matters now is whether you stand tall in this moment, whether you repair what you broke." Sandra's tears spilled freely now. Her voice shook as she spoke. "You don't understand how alone I felt back then. Every day I came home wondering if I should quit, if maybe I wasn't good enough, if maybe the voices were right, and knowing now that you were one of them. It hurts even more than I can say." Joe's eyes glistened. His usual fire was gone, replaced with regret that seemed to eat at him from the inside. "I know," he whispered, "and I am sorry. I don't expect forgiveness tonight. I just wanted you to know the truth, I wanted you to see me not as the voice I once was, but as the man who learned from his mistakes." The guests shifted uneasily, caught between sympathy and judgment. The room felt divided, some leaning toward compassion, others toward anger. It was no longer just a birthday gathering. It had become a trial of the heart. Then came another twist. Sandra's old friend, the one who had exposed Joe, stepped closer, her eyes burning. "You think words are just mistakes, Joe? You don't know the damage they leave behind. I saw her nights. I saw her cry, questioning her worth. I saw the pain you never saw. And now you think standing here with a letter makes it right?" Sandra touched her friend's arm gently, her voice softer, though trembling. "Enough. Please." She turned back to Joe. "The truth hurts, yes. But hiding, it would hurt more. At least tonight you didn't hide." Keanu nodded slowly, his calm presence anchoring the storm. "Forgiveness is not about erasing the past," he said, his voice carrying weight. "It's about deciding whether the past controls the future. The question is not whether Joe was wrong. We all know he was. The question is whether Sandra chooses to carry that weight forward or let it rest here tonight." The room grew still again. Every eye turned to Sandra, waiting for her answer. But before she could speak, Joe dropped another unexpected truth, one that shattered the fragile balance once more. "There's something else," Joe said, his voice low but heavy enough to freeze every breath in the room. "Something I never told anyone. The doubts I threw at you, they weren't really about you, Sandra. They were about me. Because back then I was jealous of your courage. You walked into the fire with grace, and I never could. I mocked you because I couldn't. Be you." The confession hit hard. Sandra's heart raced, torn between pain, shock, and a strange ache of understanding. Keanu's eyes narrowed, reading the layers beneath Joe's words. And in that fragile moment, the birthday that was supposed to be filled with laughter became something else entirely. A battle of truth, shame, resilience, and the raw question of whether kindness could survive betrayal. The cake sat untouched. The candles had long burned out, but the fire in the room was only just beginning. Forgiveness or fracture, the room had grown so still that even the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen seemed loud. Everyone was frozen, their eyes shifting between Sandra and Joe. The confession still lingered in the air. Jealousy, the kind that eats at a person quietly, had been the root of Joe's cruel words from years ago. Sandra felt her chest tighten. Jealousy was a word she had always associated with shadows, silent, hidden, creeping in when people could not admit their own fears. She never thought it had been aimed at her, not from someone like Joe. Her tears had dried, but her eyes burned, not with weakness, but with the sharp sting of betrayal. "Jealousy?" she asked softly, almost in disbelief. "You hurt me because you couldn't face yourself?" Joe's voice cracked. "Yes. I couldn't stand to see you succeed where I felt small. Instead of lifting you up, I pulled you down with words. I regret it more than anything I've done." Guests exchanged glances, some pitying him, others clearly angry on Sandra's behalf. The atmosphere was no longer one of celebration. It had become a battlefield of emotions. Keanu stepped forward again, his calm voice the only steady thread holding the moment together. "Jealousy is a poison," he said quietly, looking at Joe. "But admitting it is the first step to healing. You're standing here now, vulnerable, exposed. That's courage. But courage alone doesn't undo the hurt." Sandra's oldest friend shook her head sharply. "Don't give him credit for courage, Keanu. He had years to speak. He waited until tonight, her birthday, to drop his guilt into her lap. That's not kindness. That's selfishness." The words cut through the room. Sandra flinched. For a moment, she wondered if her friend was right. Had Joe come to heal her pain, or only his own? Joe looked around the room, his face pale, his voice trembling with a rare humility. I didn't come here for forgiveness. I came here for honesty. But if forgiveness is impossible, then let me at least say this. I respect you, Sandra. I always did. My jealousy blinded me. My silence betrayed me. But the respect was always there, buried under my own weakness. Sandra's throat tightened. She wanted to scream, to tell him how much those whispers had crushed her spirit back then, how she had walked into auditions with her confidence shattered, how she had cried herself to sleep wondering if she would ever be enough. But she also felt the flicker of something else, a strange, painful empathy dot, because beneath Joe's regret, she saw something familiar. She saw the brokenness of a human being who had made mistakes, someone who had chosen cruelty out of fear, but was now standing in front of her, stripped of pride. Dot. She turned to Keanu, searching his eyes for guidance. His gaze was steady, filled with kindness. The hardest battles, he said softly, are not against others. They're against ourselves. The question, Sandra, is not whether Joe deserves forgiveness, but whether you deserve peace. Carrying anger chains you to the past. Letting go frees you. His words landed heavily. Sandra closed her eyes for a moment, remembering all the years of doubt, the pain of being ridiculed, the weight of cruel whispers. Then she opened them again, and her voice came out steady, though it trembled at the edges. Joe, she said, your words hurt me. They left scars I still carry. But tonight, I see you not as the man who mocked me, but as the man who regrets it. I don't know if forgiveness can erase what was done, but I can choose not to let your mistakes define me anymore. I can choose to let go. The room seemed to exhale all at once. Joe's shoulders dropped, his face softening with both relief and sorrow. Thank you, he whispered, tears filling his eyes. That means more than I can ever say. But just as the heaviness began to lift, another voice shattered the fragile peace. It came from a corner of the room, low and sharp, filled with bitterness. So that's it, he confesses. And you forgive? What about accountability? What about all the voices like his that tried to crush you? What about the people still out there doing the same to others? Everyone turned to see who had spoken. It was another guest, someone Sandra barely knew, but whose eyes burned with anger. Forgiveness is not enough. Sometimes people need to be shown what their words cost. The room tensed again. Forgiveness or accountability? Two paths, each heavy, each demanding. And Sandra knew the choice she made tonight would echo far beyond her birthday. It would not only define her relationship with Joe, but also the way everyone in that room understood kindness, resilience, and strength. The silence stretched, hearts racing, waiting for her answer. And in that silence, Sandra Bullock realized the night was no longer about her birthday at all. It was about the deepest question of all. What do we do when kindness collides with betrayal? The choice that changed everything. The words hung in the air like a blade, sharp, unyielding. Forgiveness is not enough, the guest had said, their voice carrying the rage of countless unspoken wounds. Sandra's heart pounded. Her eyes moved slowly across the room, from the angry voice in the corner to her loyal friend who demanded accountability, to Joe Rogan standing fragile and humbled, and finally to Keanu Reeves, who remained steady. Like an anchor in the storm, the weight of expectation pressed down on her. Everyone waited for her response. But Sandra realized in that moment that this was not only about Joe. It was about all of them. It was about every person who had ever been broken by cruel words, every person who had chosen silence when they should have spoken, every person who carried regret like a stone in their chest. Her voice, when it came, was soft but firm, reaching every corner of the room. Kindness is not weakness, she said. Forgiveness is not forgetting, and accountability does not mean cruelty. It means truth. Tonight is not about punishing Joe. Tonight is about all of us facing what silence does, what jealousy does, what unspoken words can destroy. The room quieted. Eyes softened. Even the guest in the corner lowered their gaze, though the tension in their shoulders remained. Sandra turned back to Joe. You hurt me, yes, but you came here with honesty, and honesty deserves acknowledgement. I forgive you, not to erase the past, but to free myself from it. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing not to carry the poison anymore. You must live with your actions, Joe. You must show with your life that you are not the man you once were. Joe's eyes filled with tears. He nodded slowly, unable to speak, his chest heaving with the weight of her words. Keanu stepped closer, his calm voice carrying the final thread of wisdom. The truest strength is not in how we fight others, but in how we heal what is broken, inside ourselves. Sandra's forgiveness is not your escape, Joe. It is your chance. What you do with it will define who you are from this moment forward. The tension in the room began to dissolve, replaced with a quiet sense of reflection. The guests looked at one another differently, their eyes softer, their hearts stirred by the raw honesty of what had just unfolded. Sandra's old friend, who had fought so fiercely to protect her, wiped away a tear and whispered, "Maybe this is what strength really looks like. Not revenge, not bitterness, but release." The candles on the cake had long since melted, but their smoke still lingered faintly in the air, like a reminder that moments pass, but their meaning stays behind. Sandra looked around the room, realizing that her birthday had become something she never expected. A night where truths were revealed, wounds were reopened, but healing finally began. She reached for Joe's hand, not in affection, but in acknowledgement. "Don't waste this chance," she said. "Prove that your respect is more than words. Let your actions carry it forward." Joe's voice trembled. "I will. I promise." And in that moment, something shifted. The room felt lighter, as though the chains of silence had been broken for more than just Joe and Sandra. Everyone present carried away a piece of the lesson. That humility was stronger than pride, that kindness outlived cruelty, and that forgiveness, though painful and complicated, was the most powerful act of all. Keanu placed a gentle hand on Sandra's shoulder, his calm smile carrying reassurance. "Happy birthday," he whispered. And for the first time that night, Sandra's lips curved into a fragile but genuine smile. The night did not end with cheers or grand applause. It ended with something greater: reflection. Every guest left with a heavier heart, but also a clearer one, touched by the unexpected collision of truth and kindness. And as the door closed and the lights dimmed, Sandra Bullock knew this would be the birthday no one would ever forget. The night Joe Rogan showed up with regret. Keanu Reeves stood with kindness, and forgiveness became the most unexpected gift of all.